Hey guys, Chris here. Today, I'm at the Wichita Toy Train Club with my buddy Zach, who was in the last video. Today, we are doing a review of the Lionel Vision Line 4884 Big Boy. Now, on a side note, this video is the exact same video on the Wichita Toy Train Club's YouTube channel. We filmed it and did the review, so I thought I'd do an alternate intro and put it on my own channel. So, take a look at it. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching.
Welcome to another Wichita Toy Train Club review. I'm Zachariah. Behind the camera we have Chris. And today we're looking at the Lionel Vision Line 4884 Big Boy number 4014. So before we go into detail on this model, we're going to go through a little bit of history on the real Big Boy. Union Pacific ordered these back in 1941 and ordered 20, numbered from 4,000 to 4019, and then ordered another 5 in 1944, making a total of 25 Big Boys. Big Boy was considered a 4884 articulated type steam locomotive, and what that means is up here on the front of the pilot we have 4 pilot wheels, 8 drive wheels, another 8 drive wheels, and 4 wheels here on the trailing truck. So in that case, this was designated as a 4884, and articulated, meaning the front engine was completely loose from the rest of the frame. So this whole front engine is able to move on an articulation point underneath the boiler. So now going into Lionel's version of the Big Boy. Lionel cataloged these in their 2014 signature catalog, and these shipped just in time for Christmas of 2014. Lionel had 7 different road numbers: 4004, 4005, 4006, 4012, 4014, 4017, and 4018. These are all existing Big Boys. They skipped 4023, probably because it is the second series of Big Boys, so there are a couple of different details they would have to retool for that one Big Boy, and just wouldn't have been cost prohibitive for them to do that. These were at an MSRP of $2,700, but if you went through a good Lionel dealer, you could get a pretty good discount on that retail price. Usually, if you pre-ordered these on time, most people got these for about $2,000. Now going into a couple of the features on Lionel's Big Boy. This was equipped with Lionel's Legacy Control System, meaning you can run it in line with Lionel's Legacy Control System, or with TMCC, or conventionally with just a transformer and some track. Obviously, it is recommended to run this strictly with Legacy. Has 1 large flywheel motor, the depleting coal load feature, and 4 fan-driven smoke units, along with all LED lights all around the locomotive. Now let's go ahead and take a closer look at this engine. Now looking on the front of the locomotive at the pilot, down here at the bottom we can see we have 2 air hoses with painted ends, and over here we have this piece that comes out and reveals a O-scale coupler, and that can be replaced with this dummy O-scale coupler, which can be used for double heading. Moving up, we have a coupler cut bar, another little piece of bar there, some molded in details, our 4014 number plate, and our headlight. Now moving up here on the top of the pilot, we have a bar over here across our headlight, a couple of handrails over here on the pilot, and up here on the front of the boiler we have a nice handrail going across the front of the smoke box, 2 classification lights which are lighted, along with 2 marker lights again which are lighted, and we have a nice shiny bell here. And the front of the locomotive we can pop open, and we have a detailed interior. Here's a better look at what's on the inside of the smoke box. It's not a whole lot, but they did take the effort to go ahead and try to emulate that flue sheet back there in the back of the smoke box. So now going down the side of the locomotive, up here at front, looking on the side of the smoke box, we have 3 plates up here. Those are legible underneath a magnifying glass. Kind of hard to read. You just have to kind of get up close to it to read them. Down here at the bottom, we have our first set of drivers on our first engine, and they look great when the engine's in operation. Up here, we have a couple, our throttle linkage heading up here to the smoke box, and our handrail going down the side of the boiler. Moving back on our second engine, again, we have a bunch more valve gear and our oil lubricators and everything that you can see on the side of the locomotive. And back here starts a lot of the nice, really separately applied details, because we have all of this wonderful piping, and I know you can't see it very well being all black on black, but up in here we have a whole bunch of separately applied piping, again with some molded in details up here, and our handrail along with that throttle linkage again. So now moving back to the firebox and cab, again, here's all those wonderful pipes. You can see a little bit better with that gray at the firebox, but again, you just kind of have to be here to kind of see all the wonderful piping Lionel's got on this. And obviously we have these two great big red handles, which I believe were for the dumping the ashtray in the gigantic firebox. Again, as you can see, that firebox is huge, and it does have the variable ashpan glow effect. So as the engine increases in speed, there's a red glow that starts in the fire back down here in the ashpan, and as it increases in speed, it intensifies. And then back here, this little port right here is our port for our steam blowdown effect, which we'll get into here in a little bit later. And over here on the side of the cab, we have our engineer figure and a bunch of our row numbers, number 4014, and a bunch of other specifications underneath that. So now looking back on top of the smoke box of the locomotive, up front here we have our twin smokestacks with our smoke unit down beneath, our separately applied whistle with a big gaping hole for our whistle steam smoke effect, along with a couple of hand-painted red valves that stand out on top of the smoke box, along with a number of separately applied piping and conduits. Along with, up here you can see the contrast between our boiler black and our smoke box gray, and you can see how well Lionel did on this paint job. It looks fabulous. So now we're going to go a little bit more in depth on the main smoke unit on this locomotive. So this right here has one main smoke unit sitting underneath of it, but inside of that one unit there are two separate units. So on one side we have our batting and smoke element along with a fan, and on the other side again we have our element, batting, and a fan. And what that allows Lionel to do is right in here we can each stack goes with a separate engine. So if the front goes with the front engine, when the front engine exhausts, this goes, and when the rear engine exhausts, this goes. So what you get when you're going at a slow pace is you get puff, 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 instead of the one puff out of both stacks on most standard O-gauge engines. So there's that, and then along with that we have this smoke deflector that can sit on top of the smokestacks. But now when we set this on, Lionel has a magnet on there, which kind of helps hold it on there, but more importantly, clicks a relay that sits right up in here. And what that does is it shuts off this front stack and only turns on this rear stack. And that's what one thing Lionel found out in testing is when both of these were on with the smoke deflector, it got extremely hot up here and completely overheated the smoke units. So when you set this on here, underneath of that, only this rear unit's going. So instead of your puff, 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 everything goes puff, 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 puff. But as soon as you take this back off, you go back to your puff, 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 puff. Now granted, if you leave this on for a while and then you go back, you leave it on for a couple hours and come back around and take it off, this front unit's going to take a little bit of time to warm back up because it's been off that whole time. All of that smoke has been directed from this rear stack. So now we're going to go a little bit more in depth on the whistle. And there's not a whole lot to it, but again, this hole right here is where that smoke shoots out for the whistle steam smoke effect. And unfortunately, Lionel did use that great big hole on the past Vision Line engines. They had kept a hole underneath the whistle, which looked quite a bit better. And unfortunately, Lionel went with this different style. But nonetheless, this whistle here removes, so when you receive the engine, you will receive it without the whistle. And down here you have a little magnet along with a reciprocating magnet on the whistle, so that stays down there and won't come off unless you want it to. But this removes so you can more easily access that hole and add fluid to the smoke unit. Also, with your twin stacks, again, remember those are two completely separate units. So when you're adding fluid to those, you add fluid to both. So if you're filling both, you're adding 40 drops of smoke fluid. Or if you have your smoke deflector on, you're only adding to this rear unit. If you keep adding to that front unit, you're just going to keep flooding that front unit. Moving back on top of the boiler, up front here we have our first sand dome, or steam dome, a couple of pop-off valves that look wonderful, and a hand-painted red valve over here. So moving back, we have our rear sand dome, and this sand dome does pop off to reveal all our engine controls for the locomotive. So now I have that sand dome popped off, and on the bottom of it, you can see we have this O-ring and port over here, and that fits down in our hole, and that'll keep that smoke and fluid to keep from coming up out of that hole. Along with, you can see there's two magnets here, which hold that sand dome on and won't come off unless you want it to. Moving to our engine controls, up top here we have our program run switch, Odyssey 2 speed control on off switch, our main smoke unit on off switch, our whistle unit smoke on off switch, and our blowdown unit smoke on off switch. And right here we have our master volume pod for the speaker inside the engine. So right here, again, we have that fill port for the blowdown unit. And this actually sits at a really shallow angle, because that smoke unit actually sits down back up over here towards the rear of the locomotive. And with that, you want to add fluid to that extremely slowly, so you're not bypassing the unit and going right into the tubing to your two blowdown ports. So now moving back towards the above the firebox and the cab, again we have a number of molded in details back over around in here. And one of the most noticeable things is something that's not there. Right here should be sitting a dynamo. Lionel did not add that detail. Why, really don't know. Most engines have that dynamo feature on there. If you go to any other scale big boy, it will have that dynamo there. But for some odd reason, Lionel had overlooked that, so that is one downfall of this engine. But moving back, on top of the cab, we have this cab vent roof that pops up. So now we're looking onto the inside of the cab of the locomotive, and as you can see just by a quick glance, it is a wonderfully detailed cab interior. Up top you can see our simulated wood that's been painted green. Inside the cab on the floor we have our safety tread. There's two crew figures, our engineer on the right and our fireman on the left. And you can see a number of different hand-painted details on the back head of the boiler. And unfortunately you can't see everything in there. The whole inside, the walls and everything's been painted green, but it's a wonderfully detailed cab interior. So now this angle gives you a better view of the wall to see the other sides of the green interior. And along with that, you can see our beige curtains that sit over here. Those are just casted into the side of the cab, but they're there and they've been painted very nicely. Now looking on the front of the tender, up front here we have our tender connection from the wireless drawbar, a couple of hand-painted red valves down here, our platform, and up here we have our coal doors, and Lionel has those sprung to where they open and close. So if you press those top ones, the whole door opens. If you press the bottoms, only the bottom opens. But those are again sprung. So here's a quick view of the gap in between the engine and the tender. It's really not that bad for O scale, but what really helps though is this drop plate Lionel has right here. That does have safety tread on it, but that kind of helps bring them together. Down here you can see our wireless tether, and you can kind of see it up in there, but back up in there we have a little cylinder, and that's actually the auger detail Lionel has for the mechanical auger that fed the coal into the fire. So now looking on the side of the tender, there's not a whole lot going on here, but it's still a very nice looking tender. Up here in the top far corner, we again have another builder's plate up there. There's a toolbox down here. It says fire hose only. Our great looking Union Pacific lettering. All of our wheels and axles from the centipede style tender. And again, there's another little builder's plate sitting back here, and there's a couple separately applied piping along the bottom side. Now looking on top of the tender, up front here we have our coal load, and on most high-end Lionel and MTH steam locomotives, this would be a load of real coal. But on this model, it has the depleting coal load, so this is actually rubber. It's actually kind of hard to tell, but it is a rubber. And we'll go a little bit more in depth on that here in a little bit. Back here we have 3 water hatches. Each one opens. This one has nothing under it. This one has our coal load on-off switch. And back here, kind of hard to see, but back here we have our volume pod for the tender. So now looking on the back of the tender, up here we have our auxiliary backup light, which comes on when the engine gets power, 2 rear marker lights, our backup light, our nice crisp UP 4014 on the back, and down here we have a couple of specifications, 25,000 gallons of water, and one other thing, along with our big O-scale electrocoupler, which can be fired from the Legacy or TMCC remote. So now I got the engine flipped over so we can see the underside, and now you can kind of see how Lionel did that articulation point a little bit better. But see how that kind of moves completely free. But anyway, as you can see, we have 4 center rail pickup rollers for a good solid electrical contact, along with all of our drive gear and drivetrain down here. And one of the biggest things, especially something this big and high end, you always want to make sure you keep this thing oiled. So that's going to be a matter of taking your oil and getting down in here, down with the bushings and all the side rods, keeping all that oiled to make sure it has a long lasting life. Down here you can kind of see the Vision Line serial number that sits down here, and that's on every Vision Line item. So you'll always have a serial number on any Vision Line item. Something that's also kind of neat just to point out is your motor sits back here, and what that does is you have a drive shaft that runs up here to this first gearbox. You can see the hump here, and as you can see, that hump is right here, or that drivetrain comes right here to this axle. Well, one of the weird things is this isn't your rear driver with the traction tire, so your side rods actually do help move your power back to your traction tires. And again, this engine does have 4 traction tires. But after it leaves, that drive shaft leaves here, it goes up here to this front axle, and again does the same thing. Comes into this axle, but has to go through your side rods to come back here to the rear axle, along with your flanges and your traction tires. So now I've flipped over the tender, and we're looking at the underside of the tender. Up here we have our front truck, which is free spinning, so that allows it to lead it into curves. Back here you have our rigid axles, along with 2 center rail pickup rollers with for a good electrical contact. And down in here you can see a printed circuit board. That there is your IR sensor for your LCS sensor track, which also comes with the big boy. So now obviously we have changed layouts because our normal Cohen layout cannot handle the curves that this locomotive needs. The minimum curve on this locomotive is 072, and I highly recommend sticking with that minimum curve. Worst, you'll probably get some really bad overhang, but more than likely the engine just won't operate on any smaller curves. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start this engine up.
Union Pacific 4014. Do you read me? Over. Roger that. Union Pacific 4014. I read you. Over. Start up and hold for track orders. Over. Yes, sir. Start up and stand by. Out.
Now we're going to go through the sounds on the locomotive, and as you could tell from the startup sequence, because this is a Vision Line item, this has Road Pacific and Road Number Pacific crew talk. So let's listen to the whistle. And the bell. And they got some crew talk.
This is Union Pacific 4014. I'm made up. Am I cleared to the outbound? Over. Negative 4014. Stand by for clearance. Over. Roger. Standing by. 4014 out. 4014. You are cleared outbound. Over. That's great. We're good to go. 4014 out.
Here's a close-up shot of the whistle, and we've got a piece of black foam behind it so you can see it a little bit better on the video. And now we're back towards the cab of the locomotive, and here's a close-up shot of the blowdown effect. So now we're back here on the tender, and I'm going to go through a quick demo on the depleting coal load. So as you run this engine normally around the layout, as time goes on, depending on the labor you have the train brake set at on the locomotive and how much you increase and decrease your speed and everything, this coal load will slowly deplete. But for demonstration's sake, Lionel has a demo mode programmed inside of it, so I'll just hold down brake and it'll quickly deplete the coal load. So now we've hit rock bottom, and just for a little bit of comparison, here's my pinky finger, and you can see there's actually quite a bit of depth on how far that coal went down. Now I said that was going to be fast. That wasn't in reality that fast, but considering it is extremely low geared to do this really slow, that was quite fast. So now we're going to go ahead and refill the coal. now we've filled the coal, and sensors back here at the tender, we can go ahead and also top off the water.
My water's full. Over. Copy that, 4014. Out.
Alright, now that we got the tender topped off with fuel and water, we can go ahead and pull her on out. Alright, so we're going to take it for a quick loop around the layout.
UP 4014, you are cleared onto the main. Over. Thank you much. Cleared outbound. 4014 out. 4014 here. Train is outbound. Over. Copy that, 4014. Keep rolling. Out. dispatcher. 4014 here. Stopped and ready for another run. Over. Copy that, 4014. You're on schedule. Hold for new orders. Out. Going to sign the register book, dispatcher. 4014 out.
Alright, this concludes our review of the Lionel Vision Line Union Pacific 4884 Big Boy. Remember to like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks for watching.